These are two people who became millionaires and retired in their early 30s, while the rest of us keep getting told we need $10 million and a working pulse until age 70 just to afford basic retirement. The wildest part of their story is that they pulled it off on regular software engineer salaries, with no lottery tickets, no crypto windfall, and no inheritance landing in their laps. If you're sitting there in your 50s or 60s right now, watching your 401k like a hawk and quietly wondering whether you'll ever actually stop working, the real numbers in this video matter to you. The math behind early retirement happens to be the exact same math behind your retirement, and almost nobody is telling you the truth about how it works. Let's start with the man who basically lit the fuse on this whole movement, a Canadian software engineer named Peter Adeney, better known online as Mr. Money Mustache. Adeney moved to Boulder, Colorado in 1999, and by 2005, at the age of 30, he walked away from his career permanently. This wasn't semi-retirement or quiet consulting on the side. This was completely done. Here's where it gets interesting, because back in September of 2011, Adeney published his year-by-year net worth on his blog, which means we're not guessing at any of these numbers. We have the receipts straight from the source. Fresh out of his computer engineering degree in 1997 at age 22, Adeney started with a salary of $41,000, 0 student loans, and a net worth of exactly nothing. 1 year later, his savings climbed to $5,000, and by the end of year 2, that figure reached $23,000. In 1999, he relocated to Boulder for a job paying $77,000, picked up a starter house, and finished the year with a net worth of $67,000. The numbers from there moved fast, climbing to $150,000 by year 4, then $250,000, $365,000, $490,000, and $600,000 by year 8. Year 9 brought him to $720,000, and by year 10, his stash had reached roughly $800,000, which is when he called it, retired at 30. Before anyone writes this off as a lucky tech guy riding the dot-com boom, pay attention to the income figure that actually matters here. According to his own disclosures and a Wikipedia entry confirming the detail, Adeney and his then-wife averaged about $67,000 per year, per person. That's a solid paycheck, but it's nowhere near Silicon Valley territory. The reason they crossed $1 million wasn't the income at all. It was a savings rate sitting somewhere between 50 and 75% of what they earned, while the whole family of 3 lived on roughly $24,000 to $40,000 a year. 2 decades later, according to an AARP profile published in October of 2024, Adeney is 50 years old and still has more than $1 million invested. His annual spending stays under $40,000. His home is paid off entirely, and even a 2018 divorce that cut his net worth in half didn't push him back into the workforce. 20 years into retirement, he hasn't budged. The second case might hit even harder if you're still skeptical that this is just a one tech guy got lucky story. Kristy Shen and Bryce Leung are a Canadian couple, both computer engineers in Toronto, and Shen's backstory makes the eventual outcome even more striking. Born in rural Sichuan province, China, she grew up in a family that at one point lived on as little as 44 cents a day. That's the number she came from before any of this began. By 2012, after 7 years of saving for a house down payment, the couple had built up about 500,000 Canadian dollars. Toronto housing prices kept sprinting ahead of them, which pushed Bryce to run different numbers entirely. And that's when he realized they could either spend the next 25 years buried in mortgage debt or retire in roughly 3 years if they ditched the house plan completely. They chose the second option. The formula they followed is the same formula every single FIRE retiree uses, and it's almost insultingly simple. Take your annual expenses, which for them came to 40,000 Canadian dollars, and multiply by 25. That gave them a target of 1 million Canadian dollars, and that's the entire calculation. Annual expenses times 25. In 2015, Shen at 31 and Leung at 32 hit that exact number and walked out of their jobs for good. They've been traveling the world ever since, and based on their own reporting in recent interviews, the portfolio has grown to roughly $2.9 million during the years they've been retired. So where does that times 25 number actually come from? Because the financial industry rarely explains this in plain English. It traces back to a financial advisor named William Bengen, who published what we now call the 4% rule in the Journal of Financial Planning in 1994. Bengen studied every 30-year retirement window in American history, including the Great Depression, and his research showed that withdrawing 4% of your portfolio in year one, then adjusting that figure for inflation each year after, kept the money alive. 4 years later in 1998, 3 professors at Trinity University ran the simulations again and confirmed it, finding that a 50-50 stock and bond portfolio at a 4% withdrawal rate had roughly a 95% success rate over 30 years. 4% of $1 million works out to $40,000 a year, and that's the whole game right there. If your real spending is $40,000, $1 million funds you, and if you need $80,000, your target doubles to $2 million. Spending $120,000 a year means you're looking at $3 million to retire safely. Multiply your actual annual spending by 25, and you've got your number. This is exactly the part where anyone sitting at 55 or 60 should be paying close attention, because the financial industry has been selling you a very different story. Suze Orman went on the Afford Anything podcast back in 2018, episode 153, and stated that you need at least $5 million to retire safely, more likely $10 million. Her exact words were, $2 million is nothing, and she's repeated the $10 million figure as recently as 2024. She isn't entirely wrong if your retirement plan involves spending $350,000 a year. But for most people watching this, that number lives in pure fantasy territory, and using it as your benchmark is what keeps regular people grinding away until 70 out of fear. Here's the contrast that actually matters. The Center for Retirement Research at Boston College reports that as of 2023, the average American retires at 65 for men and 62 for women, both figures up from 62 and 59 in 1992. People are working longer, not shorter, and the U.S. personal savings rate has hovered between 3 and 8% of income for decades. Compare that to what Adeney calls the shockingly simple math of early retirement. Saving 10% of your income means roughly 51 years until you can stop working, 25% gets you there in about 32 years, and 50% cuts the runway down to 17 years. Push the rate up to 65%, and you're looking at just over 10 years, which is exactly the window Adeney himself worked through. The reason most Americans can't retire early isn't that the math is broken. It's that almost nobody saves more than 10% of what they earn. I want to be honest here, because the research demands it. Real criticisms of this approach exist, starting with the fact that Bengen's original 4% rule was built for a 30-year retirement, not a 50 or 60-year one. Extending the simulation to 50 years drops the success rate at 4% down to around 90%. American healthcare before Medicare kicks in is a brutal line item. Sequence of returns risk is genuine, and aging parents, adult kids needing help, surprise medical bills. None of that fits neatly into a spreadsheet. Here's what Adeney told AARP last year, and this is the line that should land hardest for anyone in their 50s or 60s right now. His exact words were, There's no such thing as too late because the benefits begin immediately. My ideas aren't really about early retirement. They're about a more purposeful and healthy way of living that just happens to cost less. That's the real takeaway sitting underneath all these numbers. You may not retire at 30 like Adeney, and $1 million by 31 like Kristy Shen probably isn't on your near-term calendar either. None of that matters, because the math doesn't care how old you are when you start. Annual expenses times 25 gives you the number. A 4% withdrawal funds the lifestyle, and the higher your savings rate climbs, the shorter the runway becomes, regardless of the age printed on your driver's license. Shen put it this way in a Guardian interview in 2019. Once you've been out of the matrix, you can't go back into the matrix. You've already seen too much. You've now seen the real numbers laid out end to end. $800,000 for Adeney at age 30, 1 million Canadian for Shen and Leung at 31 and 32, both built on the same boring formula that's been sitting in a 1994 financial planning journal for over 3 decades. The math has been verified since the Trinity Study landed in 1998, which means the real question isn't whether any of this works. It's what your personal number looks like and how much of your income you're actually willing to set aside to reach it. The people insisting you need $10 million to retire are usually selling something on the side. The people who actually retired just ran the math and trusted it.